Stacy Jo, thank you so much for taking the time to be with us here at the Guilt-Free Marketing Summit. I'm so glad that you're here.
Oh, I am so happy to be here and thank you for having me. I'm truly honored to be here, especially with women who are not just building businesses, but who are building kingdom legacies. I love that. And I
Absolutely.
love getting to have these conversations.
Well, what you have is so valuable because a lot of times people don't want to talk about money, and money is a hard topic for a lot of people, especially when it comes to being a Christian in your
Yeah.
business. And so you talk about being a kingdom-driven entrepreneur. So what
Yeah.
does that mean to you?
Wow. Well, being a kingdom driven entrepreneur to me means I don't see my business as mine. It's God's. He owns it. He runs it. Psalms 24:1, I love going to that where it says, the earth is the Lord's and everything in it. And that includes my business. That includes our businesses if we are going to be kingdom entrepreneurs. So instead of thinking about my profit or my growth or my brand, I say, Lord, what do you want me to use this business for? And I, you know, that's one question that changes everything because then it goes from not being mine to being his and allowing him to do what he wants. And, integrity matters as much as income, and impact matters more than popularity, which, in this season that we are in this, being, uh, I lost the word for it, but being the influencers that so many people want to be, you know, more followers and more this and more that. But it's really impact, and you can have an impact with a small audience. But it means that we are building for eternity, not just for this quarter. Um, so, for women who are watching, the very first step that I say in anything is surrender. Pause and say, God, what do you want to do with this? I dedicate this business back to you. And that's really the starting point. So, your business isn't just a career move, it's actually a kingdom assignment.
Absolutely. I totally agree. And it's funny because we prayed before we got on this. You and I had some tech issues.
Yeah,
But you know what? We worked through it, we prayed through it, and that's all part of business as well. So
100%.
so
Yeah.
he's with us in all the things. We got to go to him and ask him for the help. And so I know
Yeah.
sometimes we get as very creative entrepreneurs. We come up with great ideas. We want to launch things. What's what's something we need to really keep in mind from a financial standpoint when we're thinking about doing something new or launching a new business?
Oh, that's a really great question. And I would say the most important thing is keeping it simple.
Mm.
From a financial standpoint, you don't need complicated spreadsheets to start, but you do need clarity. You need to know your numbers from the get go and knowing what you're spending and what you're making, because especially in the beginning, it's so important to have a good foundation. So, separating the personal and business finances, which I know I've made that mistake. When I started off, I was commingling everything. And then,
Right.
you know, that was one of the biggest mistakes that I made and one of the biggest mistakes that I see, because if you don't separate them, then you're going to have a nightmare at tax time. And the second thing I would say is track everything. So, all of your expenses, and whether you're using QuickBooks or an Excel sheet, maybe even a notebook, but track your expenses, because if you don't know where your money's going, you can't steward it well. It's kind of like I liken it to driving without the headlights on. Where are you going to go? You're going to crash and burn. So you need to know where everything is going. And then pay yourself. I don't care if you make $10, pay yourself $1. Because if you don't, the business is going to end up owning you instead of you leading the business. And it's going to feel more like a burden and you're going to get burnt out. So you have to see some reward for your efforts. So If it's $10, pay yourself something. If it's $100, pay yourself something. If it's $1 million, pay yourself something. But, and then I would say most importantly, again, invite God into your money decisions.
Mm,
Um, I go back to Proverbs 3:6 that says, in all your ways acknowledge him and he will direct your paths. And that means your bank account too. It's not just, your spiritual path. It's your financial path also.
absolutely. Well, it's funny. I think that we kind of touched on it a little bit in business when you're thinking about making money
Mm-hmm.
or setting your prices or raising your prices. Those types of things can be intimidating for us. Number one, just because it's like, okay, there's a value thing, there's some of that confidence in there. But then from a kingdom standpoint, talk to us about that. Like, when we have those feelings of guilt about making money, talk to us about that.
That's a big one, and especially for women. I don't know why so much in women than in men, but I see it all the time and I've lived it too. So, women feel bad, like you said, about charging, like they feel like it's wrong to receive payment for their gifts. But the biblical truth is that stewardship is not about scarcity. It's about multiplication. And if you don't have seeds in your hand, if you don't have something in your hand, and I've been talking a lot about seeds recently. The Lord's really been laying it on me about the faith of a mustard seed and just the power in a seed. If you don't have the seeds, you can't plant them and they can't grow. So same thing with money. If you don't have the money, how can you keep your business going? So, Matthew 25, I go back to the parable of the talents. And, the master gave the talents to the servants and the one who multiplied it when they were called faithful. And that is stewardship. So taking what God has given you, regardless of whether it's one little seed or whether it's a handful of seeds, and multiplying that and increasing it for his glory. So charging fairly is not greed.
Right.
That's actually obedience because we're honoring him with the gifts that he gave us. And it allows us to provide for our household. I mean, we all have to pay our bills, right? It sustains our mission. It plants seeds in other missions that in our communities and in our world. And when you really think about it, when you realize and you come to terms with the fact that money is simply a tool in God's hands that he is stewarding to or giving to you to steward, it kind of changes your mindset. Pricing with purpose isn't greed, it's stewardship. So don't be don't be ashamed, don't be afraid to sell and to collect what is actually yours to use for God.
Yes. Well, I love that too, where, you say, ultimately, when you have to really sometimes wrap your brain around it, where it's like, it's not mine.
Right.
It's not even mine.
Yeah.
Like, it's all his. And
All of
like
it.
you said, that the parable of the talents is so powerful because
Yeah.
you are to steward his money. Yes, he's using you and the gifts he's given you, but it's his.
It is. Every penny.
Yes.
Every penny. Everything is his. There
Yes.
is nothing that is ours.
That's right.
Yeah.
That is right. Yes. Well, you have Freedom Support Solutions.
Yeah.
So tell us about the kind of clients you're working with and maybe some of the things that you've run into that you've learned where you're like, okay, this is what a lot of people miss.
Yeah. So again, I would say, the mistakes that we make and as women and not just women, but as entrepreneurs, as men, even as well. But we're talking about women right now is, mixing the personal and the business funds. Like I said, it makes tax time a nightmare. And I see it over and over and over where the women don't, when they come to my office and we start looking at stuff, they don't even know what is personal and what is business. And another one would be avoiding your numbers. Um, Many entrepreneurs do not look at their numbers until tax time.
That's
They
a
don't
real
know
thing.
their numbers.
Feel that.
What's that? Yeah, it's and that is not a good place to be. You can't make any changes. You can't make strategic choices if you're only looking at your numbers once a year. So, I work with a lot of different clients from personal to business, and regardless of whether it's personal and business, know your numbers. And I'm not saying that from a shaming standpoint. If you don't know them, you can start today. It's okay. Today's a good day to start anything, but knowing your numbers. And then here, here's one that I've seen over and over again too, and that is, and I have fallen into this myself, believing that growth will solve disorganization. Well, if I just make more money, then everything's going to get better. But the actual truth to that is that revenue actually magnifies the problem.
Hmm.
And the more we have, the more we spend, the more we look at the numbers, we're like, oh, I have this amount, I can spend this amount. So it doesn't actually help to do that if we're not organized. We want to grow with organization. So the solution is to get systems in place as early as possible and review your numbers monthly. Don't be afraid to ask for help. I think sometimes as women, we get afraid to ask for help from other women because we're afraid we're going to be judged or we're going to be looked down upon or someone's going to be like shaming us. But the truth is, we sometimes we need help, and chaos doesn't disappear with growth. It just multiplies. And we don't need to multiply chaos, right?
I, we don't want to multiply chaos. That
Right.
is not of God. God is not a chaos.
It's
It's not
not.
chaos. Um,
That's right. He's a God of order.
that's right.
Yeah.
Exactly. And so I love that you were saying, don't be afraid to reach out for help. And that is
Right.
sometimes something that we kind of hold back from, especially from a money standpoint, because there can be a lot of shame in that and everything. But
Right.
but if you're somebody, especially like me, not, I mean, I can do it, but I don't want to do it. So
Right.
I would much rather have someone else do it. Um,
Right.
so not being afraid to, go ahead and turn that over to someone like
Hmm.
yourself, or even as
Right.
it's just a bookkeeper, just to get some
Yeah.
things dialed in. So
Yeah.
that I'm not good at it. I know I'm not
Yeah.
good at it. I'm gonna turn.
Right. And don't wait till it's too late to admit that.
Yes.
And I shouldn't say too late. It's never really
Yeah,
too late. You can always start today, but you're going to pay for it because someone's going to have to clean up the mess you made.
that's
So,
right. Yes. And you will
yeah,
pay for that. So yeah.
you will pay for that. Right. For
Oh,
sure.
goodness. Well, let's talk a little bit about your discipleship. You have an inner
Mm.
healing ministry with your husband. I want to hear about that and how that all kind of ties in to finances and leadership and all the things that you are doing.
Wow. I'm passionate about this. So I have seen what inner healing does. It's opened my eyes. And, money struggles really aren't about money at all.
Yeah.
They're typically about a wound. And most often that wound comes from childhood. And as I was thinking about how to answer this question, like the Lord was giving me some serious downloads. And I'm like, wow, like I'm really excited about this topic. I hear women say all the time, I'm not worthy of wealth, or I've lived in lack all my life. I'm going to live in lack the rest of my life. I'll never be out of debt. And those, my friends, are lies that are rooted from the enemy. They're lies of the enemy, but they're rooted in past experiences. And when we believe, it all comes back to belief. When we believe those lies, it doesn't just affect our finances, it affects every decision that we make. But since we're talking about finances right now, it does affect your financial decisions. So, and I can speak firsthand from my experience on this through my healing journey because I did inner healing before my husband and I were even in ministry for this, obviously. And mine came back to not knowing my value. I didn't think I was worthy. And I had a hard time charging, just being like totally raw with you. I had a hard time charging for people for my services. I would give huge discounts, like 100% discounts sometimes. And I didn't think that I was worthy at all to be in a leadership position. I thought, who am I? Who am I to do this? I'm not worthy of that. But yet I knew that God had called me to it because he had made it so clear. But what I can tell you is that when God heals your identity, and that's what it all comes back to, where are we finding our identity? When the shame and the fear and the rejection are broken and we've gotten rid of those, then freedom can flow into every area of our lives and into our finances. And their leadership, the leadership that we then can come into becomes healthier. It becomes, then we're no longer leading from insecurity, but we're leading from our identity in Christ, which is where we should always find our identity. So I could talk about this for hours because honestly, most of the time, it's not about the money. It's about mindset. Our mindset's broken. And we have to fix our mindset, but it all comes from here. It all comes from the heart. And we say this is the longest 18 inches ever between the heart and the head, whether it's going up or down. But it all comes from here. And we have to heal those wounds and find out why do we think this way? Why do we think that we're not worthy of being a leader? Or why do we think that we're not worthy of wealth? And there's nothing wrong with wealth. There's nothing wrong with wealth. You have wealth, you can sow into his kingdom. The more you make, the more you can sow. The more seeds you have, the more you can sow. But it all comes back to what we believe, which comes down to the lie and where we're finding our identity.
That is so powerful. And I have a feeling that you were speaking directly to a lot of people in the audience. So I think it's super common. So thank you for there is hope. And it's always found in Jesus. So
always
that's where it is.
Yes.
Well, tell me about your work with
Absolutely.
the Association of Christian Business Women. So you have a pretty dynamic community, and we actually have several of your community ladies as guests on the summit. So I'm excited about that. So tell me more about that.
Yeah, I am so excited that these women are going to speak and maybe have already spoken by the time you hear me, but just so powerful because God designed us for community, and it's powerful when these women come together. I do believe that isolation is one of the biggest tools of the enemy. He wants to keep us segregated, and when we come into community, that isolation breaks. And I think we saw it a lot, through the COVID thing where we weren't able to, some of us, it took longer than others, but where we weren't able to come together and socialize. And I've seen incredible relationships born out of the Association of Christian Businesswomen. These women are my sisters. So awesome. We pray together. And in fact, we have a Friday morning prayer call that is so powerful that we have seen answers to prayer in real time while we're on the call. And it's open to anyone. I just want to throw that out there. If anybody wants to jump on our prayer call, it's Friday mornings at 8 a.m. Eastern time. And it is just a bunch of business women coming together and praying, and the Holy Spirit is in the room. And it's just we collaborate, we celebrate each other's wins. And what I love is when one woman rises, it gives the other permission and encouragement to rise too. And with community comes transformation. So when transformation happens, when you realize that you're not alone, that there are others around you who want to see you succeed. And this is not a group of women. We have a lot of coaches. We have different women in different businesses, but some are in the same type of business, and it's not we don't feel like there is competition. it is all for his kingdom. And we have serve a God of abundance, and there is an abundance of work. So, coming together in a community is so important because it really leverages who we are in Christ and encourages other people. Yeah, I mean, isolation, it really just keeps you stuck, and community pulls you forward. It pulls you into a group of women who just love one another and love to see each other win.
That is so good. And I totally agree with everything that we're doing here. And it's funny,
Yeah.
as we get through a lot of the interviews, there's a lot of there's a lot of similarities,
Yeah.
and there's good reason for that. And one
Yeah.
is community. So love that. You have a podcast, Faithfully Invested Podcast. You do this with your husband. You're
We
talking
do.
about leadership, marriage, mission, and finances.
Yeah.
Tell me just a little bit about that. That sounds like so good. I have not heard it. I'm like, now I need to go and listen.
Oh, well, that's exactly what we talk about: marriage, mission, finances, leadership. And it came out of some people saying, you guys, we were doing some lives like on Facebook or what have you, and people were like, you guys really need to do a podcast. So we were like, we put it off for a few years, and then we were like, the doors just kind of opened up. And I would love, if I could, I'd love to share one of my favorite podcast conversations because I think it's so relevant to the topic. We did in our second season, and we've only been doing this. We're in season 3 right now. We've only been doing this since June. That's when we started. We actually started on my husband's birthday on June 4th, and that was our launch date. But we did an episode called Kingdom Leadership in the Marketplace. And it was about how to lead in business without turning into a tyrant or even being a doormat. And we joked around that, sometimes people mistake servant leadership because being in the marketplace, we should be servants and we should be servant leaders. So they sometimes mistake servant leadership for walk all over me leadership. And that's not who we're supposed to be, even going back to the billing, talking about that. But I've been there. And the truth is that kingdom leadership is about walking in the authority that Jesus gives us while still serving with humility. We talked about 4 keys, which were leading with integrity, serving generously, handling conflict, and handling conflict with compassion, which is really important, and the pursuit of excellence, because God deserves our best in everything we do. And those simple shifts can change everything with how you lead a team, how you run a business. And for me, that episode is such a reminder that we don't have to compromise our values to succeed. When we lead God's way, when we put him into our business, we serve with integrity, service, compassion, excellence, and we actually position ourselves for greater influence and impact in the marketplace. And isn't that what it's all about? Impact in the marketplace for his kingdom. So we have a lot of fun. We really enjoy doing it.
That is so good. That is so good. And it ultimately it is about impact. We
Yeah.
do these businesses because, we're passionate about them. God's given us a skill of some kind, but it is
Mhm.
about impact and how are we serving? How are we sharing the gospel, and how are we
That's right.
building the kingdom ultimately? So,
Yes,
well, so you have a free gift for us. Tell us
I
about your free
do.
gift.
Well, I'm excited about the free gift because it is my ebook called Financial Foundations, Financial Organization for Small Business Owners. And it's simple. It's just a practical guide to walk you through the basics of getting your finances in order in your business. And you can really kind of think of it as a starting point to bring clarity and structure to the money side of your business, so that you can spend less time stressing, because we don't want to be stressing about our finances. That just creates cortisol and all that stuff that we don't want. And we want to spend more time focusing on our calling because he's called us to this for, you've been appointed for a purpose, right? So normally it's available on Amazon, but you're getting it for free just for being part of this summit. And I think it's a gift. I think it's such a gift to know that you're over. I'm getting tongue tied, but such a gift because I know how overwhelming finances can be. And sometimes they can seem like a mountain, but you can only scale a mountain one step at a time, right? So my prayer is that you won't just download it and it'll just sit in a computer or sit on your tablet, but you'll actually open it, you'll use it, you'll walk through it and you'll apply it because transformation comes when you put tools into action. We can have as many tools as, we can fit in our toolbox, but if we're not using them, they're just sitting in our toolbox. So I hope you enjoy it. I would love it if you would give me a review afterwards so that I know what you think of it. And you'll get the Amazon link after this podcast.
That is such a great gift. Very generous. Thank you for that. I think that's going to be very helpful for a lot of people. And I think you're right. You can have a million tools, but unless you're using them, and maybe a little accountability,
Right.
with some help with a coach or
Yes.
somebody like yourself, a little accountability goes a long way. So
100%.
Stacy Jo, thank you so much. You've just poured into us, and we're just so grateful that you've taken the time to share with us today.
Oh, well, thank you so much for having me and letting me share. And remember, I just one thing, just reminding you that, you're not running a business, you are stewarding a kingdom assignment.
Yes.
So just remember that when things get tough.
So good. So good. Thank you so much.
Thank you.